Hello, and welcome to the Fuel Growth Podcast. I'm Clint Oram.
And I'm Lizzie Overland.
And today we have with us Ryan Staley, CEO and founder of Whaleboss, a sales and marketing consulting company based in Chicago. Welcome, Ryan. Great to have you here today.
Yeah, pumped to be here.
Excellent. Right on. Well, we're excited to have you here as well. I had the opportunity to meet you in the last couple months and have become very impressed with everything that you've been doing at Whale Boss, and want to have the opportunity to get you to know a little bit better today. Let's talk a little bit more about you, Ryan. So tell me about your superhero origin story, as you referred to it. Where'd you come from, and why are you doing what you're doing today?
Basically, it all started. I've been in sales my entire career or a capacity related to it. Started off all the way from being a paper boy to yellow page advertising to inside sales in a boiler room. Did a lot of those, what you call character building jobs. And from there,
Yeah.
I shifted into outside sales for an unknown brand. Did really well, and then eventually transitioned into a leadership role where I had to revive an underperforming market, made it into one of the top performing markets in the country, and then also then got tasked to start an enterprise group where I grew from 0 to 30 million in ARR with another 30 million in capital with only 4 salespeople and no marketing, like 5.5 years. So left that corporate environment, and right now I'm helping companies apply the same principles that I did to leverage that in a resource constrained environment, specifically for tech startups and other startup type companies. And then on top of it, I have my own podcast called The Scale Up Show, and I am an instructor for the Chief Revenue Officer School for Pavilion as well. So teaching Chief Revenue Officers and VPs of sales how to execute enterprise sales.
Um, you went back and you started off your origin story as throwing newspapers. I did the same. Right, my first job at 11 years old was throwing newspapers. My first sales job, my first job overall. What about you, Lizzie? What was your first sales job?
Well, interestingly enough, it was working at the carnival from a very, very young age. In fact, there's a carnival that happens, or did happen every year in Malibu, California, where by a lot of celebrities happen to go by. And I'm going to comment on the picture behind you, Ryan, because I happened to meet David Spade doing that. And typically you wouldn't consider it a sales job. But man, my parents had me selling everything I could at the joints. We call them the joints at the carnival to bring people in 3 darts for $5 to pop balloons and whatnot. So I learned very quickly how to bring in leads.
I you know,
Yeah.
Lizzie, I think we could go down a whole path for a half an hour asking about all the tricks of the trade at the carnivals. Right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's something I didn't know. Learn something new every day.
Always.
So,
Yeah.
so Ryan, back to you here. You know, we talk about fueling growth here on this podcast, and we talk about how companies can really think about that next stage of growth and what they need to do to get there. As you're working with companies, where do you focus the discussion? What's the core of a growth story as you talk to your clients about how they can take their business to the next level?
Yeah, so there's a couple areas that I focus on. I always start with like, what do they think is their biggest problem first? Because sometimes what they think is their biggest problem might not be what the numbers tell me their biggest problem is. So
Mhm.
those are kind of two areas I start at is like, what do they think their biggest problem is? And then, like for example, if someone's like, we just need more at bats, we just need more meetings, right? But then you look at it and they're trying to get 6x their pipe in terms of the amount of deals they need to close, then more often than they're not, there's something wrong in the sales process if you need 6 times the amount of pipeline to target it. Like if you're really good, you could be 2x, 2.5x, 3x in there. So but there so that would be shifted to the sales process side, right? Or if you're looking at the front end, there is pipeline problems that companies have where they just can't create enough pipe. A lot of these VC backed companies or invested in companies like even PE companies, they'll get all this money dumped into them and then they'll hire, but then they'll do it based on capacity planning, like bodies, versus looking at a combination of capacity and demand. So then it would be more of a pipeline problem if you got salespeople with not a lot of consistent meetings. So that's kind of how I look at it through a framework of like, do they have a pipeline problem or do they have a sales problem? And then from there, prescribe a recommended program to facilitate that. And there's like six or seven different levers you could pull when it goes to creating really fast growth. And the beautiful thing is a lot of people think you got to throw people at it. And nine and a half, 10 times out of 10, you don't need to add a single person. You could just adjust what you're doing and make really big jumps in growth.
What kind of metrics when you said, just a moment ago that you start off by looking at the metrics, what are the metrics that you look at first? And by the way, I wanna absolutely come back to that 6 or 7 steps that you just referred to of unlocking growth. That seems like the magic right there, but before we get to that, tell me about the metrics that you look at to help orient yourself to a business when you come in to give them some help.
It's the quantity of leads, the average deal size, each single step in the pipeline, right? In the conversion process, and then also the speed of the sales cycle. So I would say that roughly amounts to about seven, and that's just on the front end. I mean, there's also areas in the back end where you're talking about expansion, cross sell, upsell, and then one of my favorites is systemizing customer to prospect referrals because pipeline will close in half the amount of time with twice the conversion rate, and 90 to 95% of companies aren't doing it. So it's like literally like bags of money sitting on the floor and people are jumping it over it to pick up like a penny. It's crazy.
So, you talked about volume, talked about value, you talked about conversions, you talked about velocity. Um, is your whole sales program that you talk about come back to just tuning those different metrics, or are there other elements that come into play as well? I got to imagine sales skills and coverage and that sort of thing kind of fits into the discussion as well.
Well, that's what I was talking to you about is those are more like symptoms of focus, right? So like a company at 10 million or a company at 100 million, there's probably 100 different things you could fix. But it's like, what's the one that you have to put the least amount of effort in that's going to get 90% of the results? And so that's what that's typically telling of, right? So those are symptoms of problems. And then kind of the way I look at it, and I focus, there's a lot of different areas you could focus on. You could focus on leadership development. You could focus on a lot of different areas. But if I had to break it into two core focus areas, like for what I help people with is the mid market and enterprise, right? So any kind of deals that are $30,000 plus an average deal size. And within that, there's basically the sales process, which a lot of companies try to focus on, but it's crazy. There's 100 companies that are hundreds of millions of dollars that have no sales process in, which is mind blowing to me. There's the strategy. So, how do you systemize strategy? And what that is that's orchestrating the relationships in those accounts, but then also aligning to the buyer need in terms of outcomes delivered. And then last is the execution. So that's like what every person, what what you say, when you say it, and who you say it to at what step in the process. So that's more like the tactical hand-to-hand combat. So like for the front end, that's how I would look at it. And those same principles apply for the back end. So that's kind of what I look at when we're doing that, but that should give you like a high level understanding of it.
I have a question for you. It sounded like I think I heard you say mid-market and enterprise customers that you've worked with, you've found that they don't invest or don't have a process for their sales team. Why do you think that is?
I think that so there's it's really interesting. There's two kind of camps that I've seen. And this isn't intentional. This is usually the organization emulates the the leadership function, right? So if the CEO is more of a relationship based selling person, then that's the way the entire org will be created. And they'll have like no processes in place. Then the other thing is, which is really interesting, some of the technical founders, they'll be awesome at processes and they'll be awesome at setting up systems, but then they won't focus as much on the relationship side. And so there'll be massive gaps in terms of customer relationships that don't allow them to hit that back end, that NRR, that net recurring revenue, or that expansion revenue, or the referrals, because they haven't done things along the way. So usually you'll find the organization, whether it's operationally driven or sales driven legacy, slanted to one of those two sides. And so that's how where you see kind of those situations.
And if I had to take a guess, the magic lies in somehow blending both of those, and that's where you probably come in because you're able to identify the gaps in that and raise that to your customers.
Well, because like, here's the thing, like the market's been lied to for so long. And like the number one biggest lie that I see, maybe it's not the number one, but it's up there. It's top five. Let's just say it's top five, right? Is that like a sales methodology is going to fix everything. Like, like, do you realize like the sales methodology that most people use as a default is MedPick for like enterprise deals? And there's some really good things about MedPick. But MedPic was created in like, I think it was like 1997 or 2007, right? So it was created before the iPad even existed, right? Like how much has the world changed since then? And it was created by a company that was at 300 million in revenue. So like imagine if you're a $10 million company in revenue, $20 million, and you're trying to apply what works for a $300 million company, your business, and it doesn't always work, right? There's big changes, like there's difference in infrastructure and man, all these things, right? It'd be like, Jeff Bezos does this, so we should do it at my $5 million company. Yeah, there's core principles in there as it work, but like 9.5 times out of 10, you can't just cookie cut that. And that's what a lot of people try to do with all these different sales methodologies. So they don't end up with the results they want.
Now, on the topic of sales methodologies, I've heard the comment made before that no one methodology is necessarily better than the other. The most important thing is having everybody on the same page and using the same vocabulary and approaching a customer in a common way. Would you agree with that, or do you see real differences in sales methodologies from your perspective?
Oh, I think there's big differences. There's definitely big differences. That like some of them are like just inward facing. It'd be like if you're trying to get into like a deep relationship and marry someone and you're just focused on yourself only and that's it. Like you're like, does this person meet my qualifications? Right? Just like the qualification methodologies. They meet my qualifications. Yes. Okay, we could get married. Like it doesn't factor like interacting with the other person. It doesn't factor like connecting with them. It doesn't factor in like everything else that's involved with other people. Maybe they have kids, from previous marriage. It's like not factoring any of those things. Be like, okay, you meet my checklist, so I think we're good to go. Right? Like there's literally methodologies that are like that, like asinine and crazy where it's like they don't factor in anything else. It's just like, do you meet my qualifications? Yes. Okay, let's go. Right. So I don't know. Gotta have some strong opinions every now and then, right? So um, but here's some more data behind that too. So I was in a group of 12 different like high performing VPs or chief revenue officers, and I was in a group with them and I asked them this specific question. I'm like, what sales methodology do you think is the best and why? And not one of them used only one sales methodology. And I'm like, why do you all have two or three sales methodologies for each company that you run? And they said, well, it's because none of them are complete. Like they don't work by themselves. So we have to mix multiple ones together. And so when I'm talking about that, when I look at like an operating system for a company, that's why I said it's like, okay, it's got to be the process, the strategy, and then the execution, like that. I want to call it the holy trinity of sales components or whatever you want to say, right? But that's kind of what it is when you look at it. And my hypothesis was like confirmed from the people I talked to. So
So I want to go back to a comment you made a little bit earlier that really piqued my interest. You said there's always one or two low hanging fruit in every sales organization that they can focus on to make the big impact. Is there a most common one that you've seen? Is there a mistake that companies are making over and over again that if they just fix that one thing, things would magically get better?
yeah, and I have some strong feelings about this as well. So here's what I would say. I think it goes to conditioning, right? Just like the market's conditioned to believe that if you need to grow, you got to throw SDRs and create pipeline. And that's like the number one way to create pipeline. And it's a valuable strategy and a valuable approach. However, what you'll see is companies might have 200, 500, 700, 1,000, 1,300 clients, sometimes even thousands of clients. And so what they've done with those clients is they've built up they've built up goodwill. They've built up trust because their product works and they like it and they enjoy it and they really feel good about it. Um, and then at the same time, they they know them at a personal level, right? Especially in the mid market plus, because average sales cycle could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. So you might have deep relationships with 9 to 15 people in an account. So all these variables are there. You got someone who trusts you, knows your product work. And companies don't systemize how they create referrals to their peer network. They just wait for them to come in. Why I think that's a really big mistake is because when you when you put focus, time, and energy, people be like, "Well, I tried it and it didn't work." It's like, well, that's because you asked once. You know what I mean? And you didn't systemize it. And let me give you an example of this. This is a really cool I post that I literally wrote that's just coming out in a few days. And this will give you like a real world example of it. So I've had terrible internet issues, like soul sucking internet issues that are terrible if you're a podcast host. So next thing you know, some guy I hear talking, my wife's like, "You're gonna want to talk to this guy." And I'm like, who the hell is this? It's a door-to-door person. And the guy was selling an internet service. Came down and they just put fiber in. So the guy's like, "All right, well, here's the deal. We'll do this, this, and it's going to be $80 a month." And I'm like, well, you know, I don't have a lot of time to deal with this right now. Even though have significant pain around it. So the guy throws like basically some 2 or 3 risk reversal bonuses, no contract, gives me an additional $10 a month free for HBO Max, and set no install fee, all this, right? And then as soon as I agreed to it, we set up the date, everything. He literally asked me for a referral right there. Next thing you know, so that's step one. That's one step of the process. Step two,
Mhm.
I have my install scheduled for yesterday. 2 days, 24 hours before I get a call. This would be from an inside salesperson, right? "Hey, by the way, we have this offer where you get for home security, where you get, $800 waived if we do that, blah, 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 blah." Didn't need that opportunity, but that was basically probably another $150 a month that person was offering me, and they were just confirming the implementation, right? So that's step
Mhm.
two. Step three, hour before the implementation, I get the doorbell rings and the guy's like, "I'm here just to make sure that like all your apps are set up on your phone and everything's good to go." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And next thing you know, he's like, "Okay, well, we got a program for your phones. Like, how are your phones working? What are you doing?" And then like he pulls out his like iPad, starts doing all the numbers. He's like, "Well, you could do this. We could buy this out, give this to you, so on and so forth." Right. And so if you do the math, what was originally an $80 a month deal, if I would have bought all that stuff, could have turned into like $450 a month for them. And at the same time, there was 2 processes where they asked for referrals before I even started using it, right? I haven't even used the service yet, so they asked me twice, right? Because it was built in. So imagine what happens if you apply that, not just there, but you apply it to like, "Hey, we just use Sugar CRM. Like the program's like, it's working good. We love it. Our team loves it." Boom. You ask them at the right time. You ask them specifically, and that there's more to it than that. But like, imagine what that would do to your customer base, and it just explodes. Deals close in half the amount of time at twice the rate. And so that's a long version, but that's kind of an example of like where the opportunity is. And that's a door to door salesman. So if you think if someone like that could do it, that if you apply it to your organization, what do you think the results would be? It's like mind blowing.
The takeaway I get from that, Ryan, is timing can be everything in those situations where you think at one point in the moment or the journey, I haven't used it yet. I'm not going to refer you. Someone else might say, sure, why not? You just never know, right? So asking is the first step, I think.
What's like consistency? You nailed it, Lizzie. So like there's what's the incentive, right? Or what's the pathway? What's the peak, the emotional peaks that they have, right, during the process? Like, that's the buyer side. What's your sales process and how do they align? And then what's the persuasion you use, like, that taps into the 90%? Because once people are over the age of 32, 90% of our decisions are automated. So it's like tapping into that 90%, which is what, like, they applied it pretty good. They didn't hit on all those areas, but that's kind of like the core framework that you leverage. And so yeah. So that's exactly it.
All right. Last segment that I want to dig into here for a moment with you, Ryan, about Ryan Staley, the sales leader. What are
Okay.
the top 2 or 3 mistakes that you made in your career as a sales leader that you like to pass on to our audience to encourage them not to do the same?
I'll give you the unfiltered number one response. Don't take what your team does personally, uh, even no matter how frustrating it is, right? By nature, salespeople are some of the biggest risk takers, I should say, extroverts. And so sometimes it's like trying to tame a caged animal. and so you have to like basically sometimes take what they're doing with a grain of salt because they're just trying to look out for themselves. And so that's what I would say is the number one biggest. I used to take that stuff personal, like why is this person doing this? Like, and I would get all torn up and about it, because I invested deeply into my people. But that's something that like you have to be very careful about. So I would say that was number one, and then number two is that I noticed my team work harder for me and do their best when I looked at customizing how I supported each one of them individually, based on their strengths and weaknesses was one. And the other thing that I noticed that really just drove them crazy style and then also developed deeper relationships is when I did the same thing with like what their vision and their outcomes were for their life. Right. Like I had a rep of my team that wanted to get pregnant in a year and a half and wanted to basically make X amount of money before she got pregnant because of maternity leave later. And so we built a plan around that, where I had someone else who wanted to buy a house in X amount of time. So once I individualized the support and then the alignment with their goals and visions, that really made things take off. And I didn't do that early in my career.
It's similar to what you were describing with making the connection with your prospects and making a connection with your team members too. At the end of the day, we're all people working with people.
Yeah, Lizzie nailed it. So I'm sure you're good at it.
Lizzie is the people, side of the equation. I'm quant and she's more of the qualitative side, so we make a good team
Yeah,
here. Well,
definitely.
I gotta thank you, Ryan, for your outstanding insights today. Before we wrap up today's episode, how do we find you?
Yeah. So podcast listeners, join the scale up show. That's number one. You want to listen. I interview founders who deconstruct their biggest revenue growth, like hacks and paths and things that they do. So if you're an audio person, listen there. Otherwise, check me out on LinkedIn and DM me. Like if you need help or have questions, like I post daily, try to post daily at like 8 a.m. Central Time. So that's good to find me. And then you can see my content and then, take it from there.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much, Ryan Staley, CEO and founder of Whale Boss Consulting. You've been a really insightful and fun guest here on today's episode.
Absolute pleasure, Ryan.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks, Clint. It was awesome.
Have a good one.